Susan Brinkmann, author of A Catholic Guide to Mindfulness, joins us today via Skype. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Mindfulness
has become a huge trend recently. Tell us exactly what it is.
Well, mindfulness, the trend that's out there right now, the popular trend, is the seventh step in the Buddhist Eightfold Path, which is known as right mindfulness. And that is, controlling thoughts by maintaining your awareness and your focus on the present moment, just being really hyper-focused on the present. And that's exactly what it is. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. We all really should stop and smell the roses, at least a couple times during the day to get back into the present moment. But here's what they don't tell you. This popular movement of mindfulness that's out there right now, they use Buddhist meditation techniques in order to help you develop that awareness and focus. And they kind of keep that off to the side. And it's been done in a very stealth way, even by the pioneers of this movement. So, and that's a problem. That's a real problem for Christians, because they're not really being told that sometimes by their therapists, their counselors, until they're actually involved in this type of treatment. And then they find out, what I've been practicing, this body scan meditation and this breathing space meditation, this is Buddhist. Why didn't anybody tell me this,
Yeah.
So there's ethical concerns there. It's a problem. It's a problem what's out there.
And I'm just asking for the sake of argument, why is it a problem? Somebody might say, well, what's the big deal? I'm just trying to live in the present.
Because you're not just trying to live in the present, you're trying to live in the present according to the Buddhist way of living in the present. That's why. But a lot of people don't know that, and that's not being told them. And also another thing to keep in mind, Rachel, is that there is a downside to any kind of mindfulness meditation, any kind of Eastern meditation that causes you to blank your mind, to hyper-focus like this. There's a downside to that scientists are saying is not being studied enough. Some scientists are going so far as to say it's scandalous how little that's being studied, because we do have research showing that 1 in 14 will have adverse effects from this. Another study that I found is in my book, 60% of the people who participated in that kind of meditation suffered from insomnia, panic attacks, anxiety, that they had at least one negative effect from this type of meditation. So I think people should be properly, duly informed about what they're doing.
Yeah, and mindfulness is even being taught in some public schools now as a coping mechanism. What's the danger, for Catholics when they practice this?
Well, that's a very good question. And I'll tell you, you're right on the cutting edge of what's going on right now, because the lawyers at the American Center for Law and Justice, the ACLJ, are right now sending letters to all the schools in the United States that are introducing these programs and saying, you have potential Establishment Clause problems on your hands because this stuff is teaching Buddhism. Whether or not you call it secular or not, doesn't matter. This is Buddhist. Yeah. And you need to be very careful about this. And the fact that they're teaching this with the kind of adverse effects I just mentioned, the fact that they're teaching that to children is very frightening.
Yeah.
Because these adverse effects can affect them as well. And I'm talking about the Mind Up program, which is spearheaded by Goldie Hawn, Inner Explorer, Mindful Schools. And a lot of schools, since they've been getting these letters, they are starting to back away from mindfulness in schools and pull it back out of there. But here, this is this stealth Buddhism that I've been talking about. This is what they do. They try to take the Buddhist language out of it and substitute secular or scientific language for it as if that changes things, and it doesn't. Children are still being taught that, hey, when you have any thoughts that come to your mind, even good, even bad thoughts, declare them neutral and just forget about them. Now, we don't tell children that you declare a bad thought neutral, because a bad thought can lead to bad action. And that's objectively wrong. A bad thought can be objectively wrong. You can't just teach children stuff like this. So once the lawyers started looking into this, they started saying, hey, wait a minute. This is a problem. And they have a petition right now that when I wrote this story for the Register, this was last week, there were 84,000 people had signed a petition saying, we want this out of our schools. We don't want our kids being taught this. So let's see where it goes.
How can Catholics guard themselves from these kind of non-Christian spiritual practices?
Don't participate in them. There's nothing that they offer that we don't already have in our own right. For example, if you really want to stay in the present moment, practice the presence of God and the sacrament of the present moment. Those two devotions. Sacrament of the present moment is Father J.P. de Caussade, one of the greatest spiritual directors that ever lived in our church. And then the practice of the present moment, the practice of the presence of God is Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection. That is, those two, you combine those two, and you've got mindfulness, but the Catholic version. And ours is so much richer, because instead of just sitting there in that empty void, staring at something 5 feet in front of you, just for the sake of looking at something 5 feet in front of you, now you're looking in this present moment, but you're looking at God's will for you in this present moment. What is he saying to you? What is he communicating to you? It's so much deeper. It's so much richer, and it still accomplishes the same thing. It keeps you in that present moment, in that peace and in that calm.
Yeah.
So we don't need to go there, I guess, is the answer to that. Don't go. Don't bother with it.
Yeah, we have options within our own Catholic faith, and definitely things that include God's great love for us, is such a huge part to me of the beauty of contemplative prayer. Versus just this idea of mindfulness and sort of willing things away. Where can people learn more about this issue and to get a copy of your book?
Well, you can go to Amazon.com and get a Catholic Guide to Mindfulness. That's where it's at. And also they can go to the Women of Grace blog, and this is newage.womenofgrace.com, and just look up mindfulness on that index, and there's dozens of articles on there on everything that's happening right now in mindfulness, as far as the research is concerned, what's happening out there on the spiritual side of it, and also the legal side of it now, because that's going to be a big blossoming subject in the future.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us and talking about such an important topic. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on.